On a serene December afternoon, Jason Sprague was busy working on his car in the driveway of his home. The tranquility of the neighborhood, nestled in the flourishing city of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, provided the perfect backdrop. Jason and his wife, Gia, had chosen this location carefully, drawn by its warm community and vibrant culture, with its antique stores, restaurants, and art galleries. Life had been peaceful for them since they moved to this lively town years ago. But that afternoon, the peace was interrupted, and Jason had no idea that his quiet work session was about to lead to a major misunderstanding. It began with the concerned glances from his neighbors, who were alarmed by the muffled screams they heard coming from his house. The distressed cries, sounding as if they came from a woman, echoed through the stillness of the street. Repeatedly, the voice pleaded for help, "Let me out," and "Help." The neighbors couldn't ignore the desperate cries. The source seemed to be right where Jason stood, calmly working on Gia's car. He appeared completely oblivious to the calls for help. They watched him from their front porches, puzzled at how Jason could remain so composed while such panicked cries rang out. Unable to take it any longer, one neighbor rushed inside and called 911, reporting a possible emergency. Minutes later, the wail of police sirens shattered the calm as patrol cars arrived at Jason's house. Officers stepped out, approaching cautiously, ready to intervene. Jason looked up, startled and confused by the sight of 4 uniformed officers making their way toward him. Fear gripped him. What was going on? Had something happened to his wife or family? The officers quickly explained the situation. A neighbor had called, reporting that they had heard screams for help coming from his property. Their duty was to investigate immediately. Jason, still confused, reassured the officers that there was no one in distress inside the house. His wife was out for the day, and no one else was home. But the cries his neighbors reported had been too alarming to ignore, and the police insisted on finding the source. Perplexed but cooperative, Jason told the officers he had a good idea of what might be causing the screams. With their permission, he led them to the backyard, where the mystery would soon be solved. When Jason returned moments later, he was not alone. Perched proudly on his hand was a bright green and yellow parrot. This was no ordinary bird. It was Rambo, Jason's beloved pet of 40 years, a yellow-naped Amazon parrot. With a sheepish grin, Jason introduced Rambo to the officers and explained that his parrot was the true culprit behind the distressing cries. As the police officers stared at the bird in disbelief, Jason recounted how he had taught Rambo to say phrases like "help" and "let me out" decades ago as a prank during his teenage years. Over time, Rambo had mastered these phrases, much to the amusement of Jason's family and friends. However, Jason had become so accustomed to Rambo's chatter that he barely noticed it anymore. The officers, though relieved, needed proof. They asked Jason to get Rambo to speak, to confirm that the parrot was indeed responsible for the cries heard by the neighbors. With a bit of coaxing, Rambo shyly began to speak, starting with a friendly hello. The officers listened intently, waiting for the bird to say the words that had sparked the entire situation. Then, as if on cue, Rambo yelled out, "Help! Let me out!" The officers' faces shifted from disbelief to amusement. It was an exact match of what the neighbors had heard, and the case was solved. Jason was no longer a suspect, and Rambo had been revealed as the chatty troublemaker. Reflecting on the situation, Jason could understand why his neighbors had been so concerned. From their perspective, the cries were real and urgent, and they had done the right thing by contacting the police. Jason was thankful that the misunderstanding had been cleared up and that no one had been harmed in the process. He even found the humor in it, laughing at how his teenage prank had almost gotten him into serious trouble decades later. With the situation diffused, Jason decided to pay his neighbors a visit. Carrying Rambo on his shoulder, he knocked on the door of the concerned neighbor who had made the call. The neighbor opened the door with a mix of curiosity and embarrassment, having already been informed by the police of the mix-up. Jason introduced Rambo, who happily greeted the neighbor with his usual phrases. The neighbor burst into laughter, realizing that the dramatic 911 call had been due to a talkative parrot. They had a light-hearted conversation, and Rambo even entertained the neighbor with a few more phrases and songs. Jason reassured them that they had made the right call, given the circumstances, and there were no hard feelings. The neighbor was relieved and appreciative of Jason's understanding. The story of Jason, Rambo, and the neighbor's 911 call became a source of amusement in the neighborhood for weeks to come. Even though it had been a case of mistaken identity, everyone was glad to know that their community looked out for one another. Jason, however, made a mental note to be more mindful of Rambo's vocalizations in the future to avoid any further confusion. For Jason, the event had been a surprising reminder of how small, unexpected moments can bring people together. What started as a quiet afternoon in the driveway had turned into a story that would be retold countless times, both in his neighborhood and online. And in the end, it was a testament to how even the most mundane situations can take an unexpected and humorous turn.